Welcome, welcome, welcome to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethea, and you know if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, then the positive change, change purchasing core cooperative captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy at our historically Black colleges and universities. Costs at our historically Black colleges and universities to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses, to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the Black community about the economic impact of climate change, the economic impacts about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with Executive economic impact on Black America. Also to educate the African and African American community about as we indicate, the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. The show is also brought to you every week, ladies and gentlemen, by the Black Sports Legends Foundation, BSLF HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative. And you can get more information on that initiative by logging on to our website at Positive Change and go over to our GoFundMe link and click on the HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative. The show is also brought to you every week by the National Association of Blacks in Solar. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a scheduled guest today, but we have a very, very informative show for you today. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to jump right on into our subject matter. Subject matter. We're going to jump right on into our subject matter, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about our planned program for today we were, as we normally do, we're doing some research, and on our website, we came across an article which it was done by a young man by the name of Mr. Will Blackmore, who has been writing with words in black, and he's a climate freelance writer with words in black, and he writes on climate justice. And I think he's done an outstanding job, ladies and gentlemen, as he basically talked about and a topic that we have discussed time and time again on this platform, Solar Now and the Future with its Economic Impact on Black America, as he discussed the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which was launched under the Biden-Harris administration through Executive Order 14096, which dealt with climate justice. And the Greenhouse Gas uh, Initiative had EPA had targeted $27 billion for a green fund. Now, we know very, very well the fact that we as African Americans and African people, we face higher rates of asthma, but apparently reducing air pollution and shoveling boat rides of cash to the far left activist groups is not what that is supposed to be about. And as we begin to look at what has looked, how this is being looked upon by the Trump administration, it's very, very clear that we have some serious, serious issues. And this gentleman went on and to talk about the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and he published an outstanding article, which you can find on our website at positivechangepc.com. You want to go over our news and events tab. And on February the 18th, he in fact published an article uh, entitled Climate Justice at Risk, as the Trump EPA targets a $27 billion greenhouse gas fund. Now, he went on to say that it was held as a landmark moment for climate justice and a down payment on greener, and, and a more equitable future. Last August, the Environmental Protection Agency awarded a historically $27 billion in federal dollars to combat climate change through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. The so-called Green Bank was established through the Inflation Reduction Act. The first of its kind program was designed to invest in clean energy and other climate mitigation programs, with 40% earmarked for Black, Brown, and other disadvantaged communities. Under President Biden, has now been gutted through an initiative which was called the Justice 40 Initiative. Now, if you've been following me for any time here on this platform, Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America, you know we beat the drum time and time again. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, again, around this issue of the Justice 40 Initiative, where 40% of that investment was supposed to be targeted at low and moderate income communities. Now, that has been gutted. Under the Justice 40 Initiative, there were a group of other initiatives which we will discuss in more detail, because if you've been aware of what's been going on, the Trump administration put a 90-day freeze by him signing a rash of executive orders. He has rescinded Executive Order 14096 which deals with environmental justice and climate change. He's also rescinded Executive Order 13985, which created equity, diversity, and inclusion across all 6 federal agencies. He also rescinded Executive Order 14008, which dealt with combating climate change here in the U.S. domestically and abroad. But now the Trump administration is attempting something unprecedented by clawing back tens of billions of dollars in grants that have already been distributed. The move marks a dramatic escalation in the bipartisan battle over climate spending and raises questions about the stability of federal contracts. At stake is not just the fate of clean energy projects in Black and brown communities, but the integrity of the U.S. government's ability to follow through on its promises. This is what we're dealing with right now as I speak, ladies and gentlemen. There are thousands of renewable energy projects that are on hold because these funds have been frozen. So we're going to delve deeper into where that money is. When the funds were awarded last summer, the EPA administrator, Michael Reagan, who, by the way, is a North Carolina A&T alumnus, framed the urgency of the moment. With climate impacts impacting all Americans, and especially those in communities that have been historically left behind, EPA knew it had to move swiftly and deliberately to get the historic funding out the door. Reagan said in a statement in August, only weeks ahead of the deadline set by Congress when it passed the Inflation Reduction Act 2 years prior, there was another clock ticking. However, the Biden administration was in a lame duck period, and the potential Trump presidency loomed on the horizon. Climate justice spending in a particularly needed to happen sooner rather than later. Now, the Trump EPA administration is taking unprecedented steps of attempting to claw back tens of billions of dollars already distributed in grants. Irresponsibility shoving boatloads of cash, an EPA page that somehow still remains online describes the GGRF program as a greenhouse gas initiative program, a $27 billion investment to mobilize financing and private capital to address climate crisis, ensure our country's economic competitiveness, and promote energy independence while delivering lower energy costs and economic revitalization to communities that have been historically left behind. But things look very different from the perspective of the Trump EPA. The day of irresponsibility, shoveling boatloads of cash to the far left activist groups in the name of environmental justice and climate equity are over. Lee Zealand, the new EPA administrator, said last week. Now, it's very, very interesting to me, ladies and gentlemen, how difficult it has been during the Biden-Harris administration to get people at the Department of Energy and EPA to listen to people such as myself who have been working with those companies in the marketplace with boots on the ground about what needed to happen. Yours truly here last October of 2024, we launched the campaign through this platform, Solar Now in the Future, in a press release asking the Biden-Harris administration to codify the offices of EJE across six federal agencies. And if you go into our archives here on our YouTube station, you'll be able to find that particular video and listen to it. And many things that were accomplished through those offices at EJE, at the Department of Energy, are laid out there. Now, the American Lung Association in 2024, meanwhile, more exposure to greenhouse gases, as it affects us every day as African Americans. More exposure to greenhouse gases. Meanwhile, the stakes for Black communities couldn't be higher. The American Lung Association in 2024 State of the Air report found that Black people and other people of color are 2 to 3 times more likely to be exposed to unhealthy air than white people. Black folks are also more likely to have chronic conditions like asthma that can be worsened by exposure to greenhouse gases like ozone. And in 100 million Americans, and not just Black and brown people, live in communities with unhealthy levels of ozone pollution. These are facts, ladies and gentlemen. These are not things that I'm making up. This is what the science shows. What happens if EPA reneges? Fixing that no longer seems to be the EPA's focus. And Zealand claimed the transfer of funds to private banks, government practice more than 40 years. Now, there's a blue link in the and you'll be able to find this article under my news and events tab, and you want to go in and you want to read this article in its entirety. EPA works with Citibank, utilize long-standing bipartisan tool for advancing public-private partnerships. Bottom line, Treasury has over a century of experience in implementing financial agents agreements with private banks. These agreements have been implemented under Republican and Democratic administration to manage trillions of dollars. EPA partnered with the Treasury because the capability fits the need of its program while enabling robust programs and for the purpose of oversight and fraud and to prevent fraud. On February 13th of last year, EPA of this year, Administrator Lee Zealand called for the termination of the federal government's financial agreements with Citibank, which holds an account for 8 grantees under the Greenhouse Gas Initiative Fund. He stated this scheme was the first of its kind in EPA's history, and it was purposefully designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight. This post is intended to set the record straight about financial agents, which are both far more rigorous and far less scrupulous than the administration. Now, there's a video that you can watch. The Department of Treasury is authorized to use private banks as financial agents under statutes dating back to the National Bank Act of 1863 and 1864. For over 100 years, this is precisely what the federal government has done through private sector partnerships to help power the economy, spur innovation, and provide certain types of financial services. These financial agencies' agreements with FAA are partnerships, trusted financial institutions to administer selected initiatives to manage the distribution of federal funds and provide other financial services at the government for the government will not be positioned to perform, according to the Treasury. The services provided financial agents, depositories, include the over $4 trillion awarded in revenues. Now, this is not new, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a practice, which you know, that's been going on over 100 years. What's very important about this is that former Vice President Kamala Harris, under the Biden-Harris administration, they had a meeting at Coppin State University in Baltimore where they called in a number of CDFIs. And some of those CDFIs were CDFIs such as Hope Credit Union, which is based in Jackson, Mississippi, which is an African American CDFI. And there were several other African American CDFIs which were slated to receive this funding. I have been in communication with the Maryland Clean Energy Center here in Maryland, my home state, where the state of Maryland was supposed to receive 62 million for under the greenhouse gas initiative, under the solar for all initiative, because there were 60 grantees from that particular program, and the Maryland Clean Energy Center was that entity for the state that was supposed to be managing that particular program. Now, roughly $20 billion of our tax dollars were parked at the outside financial institution by the Biden EPA, according to this Zealand guy who's the new head of EPA. He's calling it a scheme, ladies and gentlemen, was the first of its kind in EPA's history and was purposely designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job to reduce oversight. This is what Zealand said. Okay? That 20 billion was moved by design to Citibank with the assistance of the Treasury Department and sets in accounts held by grant recipients from the fund two major programs. $14 billion for the National Clean Investment Fund and $6 billion for the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, which is designed to bring funds to low and moderate income communities particularly. Another $7 billion in an overall greenhouse gas initiative fund budgeted for an initiative which was launched in the District of Columbia. That pilot program was called the Solar for All program. I just mentioned that, which works on accessibility for affordable clean energy. That money is still held by the federal government, not private banks. So that means that money means even though the Trump administration has been sued by 23 state U.S. attorneys, and a judge has issued a stay indicating that that money must be released. But that funding has still not gone out of the coffers as we're speaking today, March 6, 2025. Now, unlike the Trump administration, efforts to freeze federal funds over Elon Musk's attempt through what they call DOS to cut budgets of certain federal programs like Medicaid. The EPA is trying to get back money that is already paid out. And that makes Zealand in his attempt more challenging and potentially more destabilizing on the long shot chance that he can be successful. Because without evidence that there has been fraud, which EPA has yet to provide, pulling back $20 billion would mean tearing up contracts that the government made with both recipients of the funds and Citibank too. Now, This is not really sexy, ladies and gentlemen, but these type of funding opportunities have come along once in the history of the United States of America. When Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, was one of the first things he did when he came to office. $1.7 trillion flowed out of the federal coffers under two initiatives, the initiative called Invest in America agenda, in which you had the Build Back Better, which over 66,000 projects for building bridges and roads. You also had nationwide, you also had the Inflation Reduction Act. And we're going to continue to drill down on this platform today, ladies and gentlemen, because this young brother did an excellent job in putting this article together. Most likely outcome of EPA reneging on its grants is a series of lawsuits and eventually payouts of even more money if and when the agency eventually loses the cases in court, which it's likely would. That's the whole piece, ladies and gentlemen. All the projects and all the programs and all the planning and all the programs that were going to be executed, the states and these entities working with towns and county governments, they can't implement anything. I was on a call here with the Maryland Clean Energy Center where they gave a breakdown on how the money was to be distributed and what programs and how that money would be funded here in the state of Maryland. And you're talking about a lot of jobs, a lot of contracts, a lot of opportunities that companies simply will not receive until this money is released. What I didn't like about it is the fact that the African American businesses and organizations receive very little of this funding. And when we began to look at federal contractors, based on the information that I was privy to be able to gain from Mr. Ron Busby, who is chairman of the National Black Chamber of Commerce, he talked about the annual minority contracting opportunities in 20 for minority certified businesses. They're called MCBs under SBA. And that in 2023, it was $864 billion. 200 billion went straight to the Pentagon for contracting out to MCBs, minority certified businesses. That left 646 billion. Yeah, it was 846 billion. 200 went to the Pentagon for contracts, and the other 646 billion, out of that, African American, we received less than 1.5, around 1.5%. When you break that down in numbers, you're talking about $10 billion. That's the most that have ever been received by African American businesses in this country. Hispanics was around 1.8%. Then you have Asians, Asian Americans, and Native Americans. It was a very, very small percentage. 78%, let me be clear, of those federal contracting dollars went to white women. Now, this is why when you look at who went to the polls and put Trump back in office, that this is a very telling story of white women and how they're going to vote their pocketbooks and their interests. And under 8A contracting law, they have been considered as minorities. So they've been the biggest beneficiary. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? With this money frozen, they are impacted and their companies will suffer too. So a lot of people are suffering with buyer's remorse right now. Let's continue to drill down on this particular article that this brother has done such an excellent job. And I want to give Willie Blackmore, who's a freelance writer, his props because he put this together. Now, as we were talking about looking at where this money is, okay? Now, I just talked about the $7 billion that was for from the Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Fund budgeted for the Solar for All program. Unlike the Trump administration, efforts to freeze federal funds are Elon Musk's to attempt with DOS to cut budgets for certain federal programs like Medicaid and Social Security. And let me be clear about this, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to have some serious problems in the suites and in the streets when they start messing with Social Security. Take it from me, a baby boomer who's worked all his life. And as they say in the joke that's not funny, I get that Richard Pryor money. Like Richard Pryor said, I get them twos and pews every month. I don't get an eagle, I get a sparrow in the mail. So if you think that you're gonna mess with my few coins, and I know how to get to the Capitol, just like most folks do, my age, and you'll have more of us down there, old folks, raising hell. We're gonna make January 6th look like it was a picnic if they don't do something about stopping this craziness where they would intend to cut Medicaid, Medicare, $880 billion over 10 years out of the SNAP programs, and to look at how we're being targeted as poor and working class folk. That's an understatement. Now, to make tax breaks for the billionaires that was set behind Trump back on January the 20th, oh no. So I want everyone out there who might be listening or not listening to listen and pass the word. A whole bunch of young folks, well, their grandparents and parents suffer from the same disease that I suffer from. It's called they grown, but they ain't gone. So I still got grown folks who work every day under my roof because and they contribute. But the fact of the matter is they can't afford to buy a home. With the rise of insurance, 11% for auto, and the rise of groceries, we are being forced to circle the wagons and make it very, very plain to those folks who sat on their asses and did not get out to vote that, it's something called elections and it's something called consequences with elections. And for those folks who voted for, I refer to him as COVID 45 plus 2 with 34 felony counts looking straight at you. And Project 25 that he didn't know nothing about, they're in full mode of executing that plan. And they're coming after the money, ladies and gentlemen. There ain't nothing funny when you ain't got no money. Because this is what the game is about. That's why we are drilling down on this particular article as we've been look at Medicaid. The EPA is trying to go back, is trying to get back money that has already been paid out. And that makes what Zealand doing is attempting more challenging and potentially more destabilizing on the long shot chance that he is successful. Because without evidence of fraud, which EPA cannot prove, pulling back $20 billion would mean tearing up contracts that the government made with both recipients, the funds, and Citibank too. Most likely the outcome of the EPA reneging on grants is a serious lawsuit and eventually payouts even more money if when the agency finally loses those cases in court. If the government and the contracts without legal justification when eventually owe damages to those people when they sue, but will not be getting the services that are under contract. Now, these are serious things, ladies and gentlemen. Let me give you an example. The Solar for All program was supposed to benefit 900,000 low and moderate income residents across this country. David Supper, a professor at Georgetown University Law School at Politico EE News. But legal risk doesn't seem to be slowing down Zealand's and the EPA. Now, this is where we are. We're talking about real issues affecting real people. Now, there are several other articles, ladies and gentlemen, that we're going to touch on in this platform. But as we always do, we always take a pause for the clause to let people that know that this show is brought to you by the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC, which serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also, to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. This show is also brought to you every week by the National Association of Blacks in Solar. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to look at EPA killed a $50 million justice grant that had already been shelved. And this article also was done by this brother, Willie Blackmore, and he published this on February the 24th of 2024. Environmental Protection Agency boosted, it canceled a $50 million grant for Climate Justice Alliance because members wanted independent Palestinian state, but the Biden administration had already shelved the grant, apparently for the same reason. Now, folks don't understand how world politics and world politics play on the domestic level. It's real interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the overview is the Climate Justice Alliance distributes grants to smaller local organizations to fight climate change, but it's pressured by the Biden-Harris administration, which slow-walked a multi-million-dollar grant because it pressured the White House to stop the war in Gaza, may have set up the Trump administration to kill the grant for good. Now, these are things that folks can't, especially young folks, can't see down the road. But as we began to unpack these things, here's what's happened. In the first week back in power, in the first week back in power, the Trump administration has made no secret that it will stop or undo most of former President Joe Biden's progressive accomplishments. So it wasn't a surprise when the new Environmental Protection Agency administrator shut down a $50 million grant earmarked for fighting climate change because the recipients supported the Palestinians and Palestine. The administrator Lee Zealand boasted about the move on February 13th on social media. I just canceled a $50 million Biden-era environmental justice grant to the Climate Justice Alliance, which believes climate justice travels through a free Palestine slogan featured on the organization's website. So this is why people are very, very, very careful with what type of alliances they build when they go to the table. Because when you're dealing with the government, depending on what happens. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about what really happened. As we begin to look at these grant opportunities and what's going on at EPA, because this just didn't go on at EPA. This went across all 6 federal agencies. And as I indicated to you, we in fact had spoken with members of the EJE office, Justice and Equity Office. As a matter of fact, I had the young lady on this platform talking about programs that was coming out of the Department of Energy's EJE office. And I made very, very clear to her that if that agencies under Executive Order 14008 was not codified by the U.S. House and Senate through a legislative bill and signed into law, when the next administration came to power, they'd be in the street. Well, most folks think all folks are either crazy or stupid. But my grandmama used to tell me a long time ago, you can have all the initials in the front or back of your name. But the common sense was common, then everybody have some. So I never forgot that. And that's what I looked upon as I talked to Mrs. Shalea Marset back in October of last year, as I was at the Department of Energy for their Energy Justice Week. And as I told her in the hallway, we need to talk. Well, she looked at me and sort of played me off as though, you can't be serious I'm going to give you time to talk. I'd also like to point out the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that all of those sisters that were put in front of an organization that I helped establish called the National Association of Blacks in Solar, because I called out at a American Association of Blacks in Solar summit several years back the fact that Mrs. Paula Glover was then the acting president. If you're talking about providing mentorship for young African Americans who want to enter the energy field, and you have a summit here in Washington, D.C., and we have Howard University, we got University of District of Columbia, we have Gallaudet University, we got Georgetown, GW, AU, thrown a stone throw from 14th and F Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. Why weren't any of these folks in graduate school getting their MBAs invited down to hear these presenters? Well, some folks didn't take kindly to that. So they came up with the idea of starting another organization, and our organization was called BOSS, Black Owners of Solar Services. So rather than me going for the divide and conquer move, I said, oh no, we're not going to fight that. We're going to let them run how they're going to run. So last October, when I was at the Department of Energy, they made an announcement that BOSS would be receiving $6.3 million to help bring and jumpstart more young African Americans in the and scaling those few African American solar installation design firms that we had. That was how they made the announcement. We found out after I had several members of the organization, which I now am the chairman of the board of directors, and we've elected a younger president to inquire about getting some assistance in their states where they're located, and found out if you weren't in North Carolina, you couldn't get no help. If you weren't in the state of North Carolina, you couldn't get any help. So I don't know what wave of what monies that they received, but I do know they have a nice website. But I also believe and know that the funding is also frozen for them. So when we begin to look at where we need to go from here, it's very, very clear that for Black folks, we need to stop playing these games with each other, circle the wagons, get behind Congresswoman Shontel Brown and Congressman Jamie Raskin. Congresswoman Shontel Brown is from Ohio, and Congressman Raskin is from Montgomery County, Maryland. And they have introduced the bill called H.R. 989. And that particular bill is to be codified because Trump also signed an executive order that rescinded the 1964 Equal Employment Opportunities Act, which made it illegal to discriminate against in the government and giving out federal contracts. Today, it is not illegal for someone who don't look like me to tell you no to your face because of the color of your skin, your sexual origin or preference. That is no longer the law of the land because it was not codified into law by Congress. Now, they only have 25 co-sponsors of this bill. Every entity that has been affected by Lee Zealand and his rush to pull back funding and hold up funding through EPA, through the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, should be jumping on board to support the efforts that the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC, yours truly, is working on and building collaborations here in Washington, D.C., with organizations that we have already been in contact with my congressman that I've already been in contact with, to let them know that we need assistance with getting in contact with those legislative directives and setting up meetings with Congressman Shontel Brown and Congressman what? Congressman from Jamie Raskin from Montgomery County, because we urgently need to make sure that we got all hands on deck, because we're going to have to fight this fight. Like I told people before, we just in the first quarter, and everybody needs to scrap make sure that the shoulder pads and helmets are fitting straight and tight, and you ready to rumble, because this is what we're talking about. They're coming after the money, ladies and gentlemen, and that's real talk. Now, we plan to do what we need to do to make these things happen on our end, but it won't happen in a vacuum. Now, looking at this particular grant that we're talking about that was shelved, you're talking about, it came from an initiative that the grant was part of a $600 million pass-through funding budget for the Environmental Justice Thriving Community Grant Making Program, part of the Inflation Reduction Act, Biden's signature program, part of the Inflation Reduction Act, Biden's signature legislation accomplished. $50 million set aside for Climate Justice Alliance. That program would have bankrolled smaller grants to local organizations working on climate justice issues like clean water, access to drought and wildfires across the western United States, as well as tribal communities throughout the country. And we say wildfires in my home state of South Carolina right now, that's burned over 1,000 acres, burning out of control, and the governor's hollering, oh, we need to declare a national disaster. Well, you should have thought about that before you had a bunch of folks don't look like me vote against their own damn interests. So where you go get some help now? See, we're going to make it plain on this show, ladies and gentlemen, because we are not going to sit back and play these games with ourselves. But the grant was the only one from the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Program that wasn't disturbed before Biden left office in January. That was despite the effort of EPA staffers in D.C. They wrote an open letter arguing that the White House was punishing the CJF because of a pro-Palestinian position in the war. And I understand that. At the same time, a number of progressive lawmakers, including Representative Alexander Cortez of New York, as well as Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts and Bernie Sanders of Vermont, pushed the EPA to release the funds, which they believe will disappear if kept in limbo. Now, CJA has scrapped its plan forward to the grants to local organization, has pinned the blame on the Biden administration. Their legacy is now one of broken promises to the frontline communities. Well, yeah, well, that is how that played out. And now we're back to justice zero under the Trump administration. Environmental justice is a pair of diversity compared paired with diversity, equity, and inclusion, a trigger word that catches the attention of the budget cutters. 50 million in small change compared to 20 billion in the climate change related fund already distributed through EPA, now also trying to claw it back. So this article ties into the last article, ladies and gentlemen. These are the things that are going on as we speak. People are talking about Oscars, Lottie, Dottie, and everybody. But that ain't gonna pay no bills. And believe me, we're not talking about something that is a want. I tell everybody it's a necessity. Electricity. Everything starts with energy, everything ends with energy. Let me be clear, ladies and gentlemen. Had it not been for Governor Joseph Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who had the foresight and the vision to file a lawsuit last December at the Federal Regulatory Commission here in Washington, D.C., against an organization that called the PJM, which is a regulatory entity which controls the price of energy, the distribution of energy, what type of energy can be used in the marketplace. And you got a lot of stakeholders like utility companies and everybody else's hands in the till. And you can believe that the gas, natural gas, coal, and fossil fuel industry, they don't care nothing about no renewables unless they own them and control them. They don't want you to have nothing. They don't want you to have a PV system on your roof. And the sun comes up over everybody's home every day. Now, these are things that are happening as we speak. Now, I'm not making any of this up. As we are here on the platform of solar now and the future with its economic impact on Black America. Let's take a look at Los Angeles cuts homelessness, but wildfires threaten to erase the program. I call it, some folks call it Hollywood, I call it Hollywood. And in the city of angels, Los Angeles cut homeless wildfires threaten to erase that progress. After Palisades and the Eaton fire, some people are moving back into their cars because they don't have any money to pay for temporary housing. That sound familiar? Altadena, which is a predominantly African-American community in LA, if you've ever been out to LA. As flames engulf and nearby canyon, dozens of residents in a sovereign living fled to an unoccupied building about 30 miles south. The evacuees, many of whom were previously homeless, watched helplessly as their homes burned on live TV. When they woke on an air mattress the next morning, loss set in. Some feared uncertainty. Others were jolted by the lives they thought they left behind. I had nothing but the clothes on my back, and it just brought back all those feelings of being homelessness and as a drug addict. One resident, Sean Brown, kind of like I was back to square one. This is what's happening, ladies and gentlemen. If you ever been homeless in your life, and it doesn't take much to do that. When we begin to look at the division of wealth in this country between white and Black communities, Black people know how to rise from the ashes. Okay, the large two-story Aladina house known to the staff and residents of Art House was surrounded by fruit trees and rugged mountains. For many, it was a safe place that enabled them to achieve and maintain sobriety and rebuild relationships and hold down jobs. Round 35 was among nearly 50 people displaced in January after a massive Eaton fire destroyed one property and damaged another operated by the nonprofit. The Los Angeles Centers for Alcohol and Drug Abuse, supported by public dollars and organizations to provide housing, behavioral health treatment to people struggling with addiction. Many have been living on the streets. Operators say both properties were uninhabitable and they were searching for permanent housing for the displaced. This is what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. When you freeze these kind of this funding up, this you impacting people. These are real people. We're not talking about objects, we're talking about human beings. Our residents are still in temporary lodging right now. We're looking for some on the interim basis, but we still need to identify long-term houses for them, said Joanne Narrative, CEO of the nonprofit. And we need even more beds. We're seeing even bigger demand of treatment and services after the fires. I'm quite sure they are. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to touch on this, and we tried to touch on several articles. We have come to the end of another show here on Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America, ladies and gentlemen. We are still struggling in the process with this platform as we've changed how we broadcast. We have attempted to use a platform called Podbean, and we've had some difficulties with that. So we are streaming this program over our YouTube channel. So you'll be able to go to the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative YouTube Digital Podcast Network. You can go online. You can go directly to our show online, and you'll be able to find this platform, Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. And we're going to keep doing what we're doing here, ladies and gentlemen, because people need this information, and this is some valuable information that we're attempting to bring to our listening audience here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Now, I don't have not been able to integrate our sound, but I'm going to play a little piece of our closing theme song for the show today, and hopefully it will take and you'll be able to hear it. It's called Desert Storm. Okay? As we indicated, we don't want you to meet us back here. We want you to beat us back here as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And as we say all the time, we want you to go in peace. And until next week, thank you for joining me here, your host, Ronald Bethea, on Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And until next week, be safe and go in peace.